most business owners, they don't really care what the software is. It's not, they just want the result of a systemized business. They could be using, A4 bits of paper with systems scribbled on them, shoved into a shoebox. If it worked, that they'd be happy with that. Where people get stuck is, yes, I'm sold on systems and processes, but where do I get started and how do I do it? And like a lot of business owners that have been around the traps for a while, they've read the books. They read the E-Myth and Traction and Scaling Up, and a lot of these books, they talk about systems and processes, but they don't really tell you how to do it.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no-bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer, and welcome back to another episode of Show Me the Nuggets. I'm super excited today to be talking about two things that are near and dear to my heart, SEO and systems and processes and automating your business. And I have on a special guest today that I'm excited to pick his brain about these two topics, Dave Jenyns. So Dave, welcome officially to the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for the invite, Joe. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we're gonna go with a working title today of really the 7-step program to build the ultimate success system for your business. My team did a bunch of research on your background and told me about all kinds of crazy stuff that you guys got going on, from your SEO services, your podcast, SystemHUB and SYSTEMology. Could you do us a quick catch up on Dave Jenyns and how you landed in this crazy world of SEO and digital marketing as we know it?
Yeah, for sure. So just started off straight out of school thinking I wanted to make as much money as possible. So I went and took out a loan and did one of those weekend learn how to trade the stock market type courses. And then I got to the end of that weekend and realized, hang on, you kind of need money to trade the stock market. And here I was with a big loan living in a 2-bedroom flat with my mum. So I then just started getting online and trying to learn about, well, how can I make money, looking for different making money opportunities, jumped from one thing to the next. And I ended up co-authoring a product in the stock market education space with someone that I'd met on that course that I did. And the product was great. I mean, we got excellent feedback on it. And one thing that I very quickly found, it's not enough to have a great product. You also need to then get that product out in front of the right target audience. So I got very interested in online marketing and went through all of the legends, looking at direct response and some of the early days of internet marketing and search engine optimization. It was, just early 2000s. So there was still, SEO just wasn't where it is today. Like, it wasn't talked about, educated about, promoted. It was very early days, and it meant there was a huge opportunity. I marketed that stock market education product for a good number of years, and then they changed some rules here in Australia around what they considered financial advice, and you needed to be licensed to be selling the type of educational material that we had. So at that point, I built up a pretty big team. My business partner decided to head in one direction, I headed in the other. Here I was with a team of outsourcers and part-timers working from home, scattered all over the world. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with this team? And then we thought, well, let's apply all of this knowledge from the stock market education space, which is hyper competitive. Let's apply it to local businesses. And just straight out of the gate, we were just crushing it. It was so early days with SEO. I felt a little bit like a magician. Someone would come to me with $1 and I'd magically turn it into 10 for them. And that was the heyday and happy days of SEO. And I stayed in that business for about 10 years and then found out, like very heavily working in the operations. Then I found out we were pregnant and I didn't want to be the dad who was always too busy, just working incredibly long hours in the business. And I hired a CEO. She came in, over a period of about sort of 6 to 12 months, we systemized that business, finally got me out of the operations. She ran it for 3 years. And then I started up some of the side businesses that initially were the side hustles, SystemHUB and SYSTEMology. And then about a year ago, actually, I had no intentions of selling Melbourne SEO, but Melissa, the CEO, because it worked out to be quite a good cash cow for me. She was running it. I'd chat with her about once a quarter. As the owner, I'd get a profit distribution. And I thought, well, I'm just going to sit on this business, until the industry completely changes or something happens. So she went over to the States for some family reasons. When she came back, she resigned. She's from the US. She's based here in Australia. But she said, look, I've got to move back to the US. And then that's when I said, well, I'm so focused on this SystemHUB and SYSTEMology stuff that let's go ahead and sell the digital agency, because that'll be perfect testament for starting a business, building it up, systemizing it, having a CEO run it, and then sell it. And then I've gone full in on SystemHUB and SYSTEMology. And I mean, I asked the person who purchased the business afterwards why they purchased it. So there were two main reasons: one, financial performance, and two, the systems. They said you'd managed to run it without you for 3 years, that they knew the business now wasn't dependent on me. And that's kind of like, I don't know if that's the short version or the long version, but that's how we got to where we are today.
No, that's great. And I think that, so many agency owners can only imagine, right? Working once a quarter, checking in with the team once a quarter.
Hey, real quick, before we dive into the rest of this episode, real quick, I promise my team and I would like to personally thank you, our audience, yes, you listening right now, for all the amazing support that you guys have been giving the podcast. The growth has been just crazy. And I want you to know that we're super, super appreciative to you. So we've been trying to think of something cool that we could do to give back to our audience, to give back to you guys. And I think we've come up with something that's really, really unique. It's something that's special. So here's the thing. The team here at Digital Triggers, my own little team here, has decided that we're going to give away a gift pack that includes our top of the line resources to sell SEO, right? We know that so many of you guys out there are agencies. This is going to literally give you contracts, proposals, pitches, scripts that you guys can use, outreach templates. It's a pack of assets and collateral for anybody wanting to sell SEO services or marketing services to any type of business, not just local businesses. This has been used to land e-com deals, all kinds of deals out there. So if you didn't hear that, let me make it a little more clear. Okay, our Digital Triggers family is giving you some of the best of the content and the resources that we've ever put together, absolutely free, just for listening to the podcast. Okay, all that you have to do is go to digitaltriggers.io/gift pack. And you are good to go, folks. It is that simple. We'll make sure that this page is up and ready for you guys by the time this episode airs. And with that being said, let's get back to the episode. All right, that was all right. I think that went okay.
So let's fast forward a little bit and tell us, Dave, about what the heck SystemHUB and SYSTEMology is.
Yeah, so SystemHUB came first, and it was the side business, and we built this software to solve our own problem. And it's a place to store a business's systems, processes, checklists, kind of like, how a lot of people, when they create systems and processes in their agency, they might store it in a Dropbox folder, or they're scattered over lots of computers, or they put it in Google Drive, and some of them are in Google Docs, and it's just one big mess. And there's a lot of limitations with it. So we built a platform that was purpose designed for housing systems and processes in one location with strong permissions, and purpose built so it's simple for everybody to use. And we ran that SaaS for a good couple of years as that side project before I started to look at, well, what's the difference between those businesses that make systems work and those that just subscribe to a new shiny tool and then do nothing with it. And as I dug in, I realized most business owners, they don't really care what the software is. It's not, they just want the result of a systemized business. They could be using, A4 bits of paper with systems scribbled on them, shoved into a shoebox. If it worked, that they'd be happy with that. Where people get stuck is, yes, I'm sold on systems and processes, but where do I get started and how do I do it? And like a lot of business owners that have been around the traps for a while, they've read the books. They read the E-Myth and Traction and Scaling Up, and a lot of these books, they talk about systems and processes, but they don't really tell you how to do it. And that's where Systemology was born. And I thought, well, let's create the system for systemizing a business. And it's a 7-step framework, which it's platform agnostic. I mean, it's not built around SystemHUB. It is more a framework of how do you identify the minimum viable systems? How do you break a lot of the myths? That's the other thing. I used to have myths as a digital agency owner, where I used to think, oh, I'm the only one who could build the systems, or even if I built the systems, my team wouldn't follow them anyway. And, oh, I'm in a digital agency and things change so quickly. What's the point of writing a system? Because they're going to get out of date. So I had all of this baggage in my head as to why I couldn't systemize my business. And that was a big part of Systemology as well, is to try and break those misconceptions.
I love those misconceptions, man. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I can just hear people listening right in the audience like, oh, but I can't do that. That's not me. It won't work in my situation. I used to always tell people that they're not special. And it was just like, that's not really quite right. But one of my coaches, Alex Sharfin, has a saying for it. He says, you're not a freaking unicorn, right? And I think it's just so much better. I love it. But I'm glad that you brought that up.
No, I think one thing I find as well with a lot of business owners, a great book worth reading is one called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. And he talks about the relationship between, he calls them visionaries and integrators. Michael Gerber, the original godfather of business systems, he used to call them, and still does, leader and manager. But it's this whole idea that you've got the big picture thinker, and then you've got the detailed operations person. And what happens is oftentimes the founder of the agency is a big picture thinker. They're very creative. They think, oh, because I'm not a systems person, I can't run a systems-centered business. But the founder's mind and the visionary's mind is wired differently from the way that an operations manager looks at things, detail orientated, focused on managing the team. They go all the way through to completion. That's your operations person. And if you recruit correctly, you find people who resonate with systems, and A players actually love the idea of great systems and processes. So it's kind of, people just jump to the conclusion that, oh yes, this won't work for me. And oftentimes it's because they've approached it the wrong way the first time, and then they just give up.
Oh man, I completely agree. I love it. Systems and process is a big key for me. And I'd love to, I think, spend the next section of time breaking down, if it makes sense, the 7 steps, talk about the framework a little bit. And I'd like to contextually, where possible, Dave, really relate to the Melbourne SEO business if we can, because so many of our followers are marketers and agency owners and SEO agencies. I think it would give really, really good takeaways and perspective as well.
Perfect. Well, the 7 steps, and one of them, I mean, you don't need to get the book or do anything. I can just tell you exactly what the exercise is now, and someone listening to this can do it. So the first step, and it answers the most common question I get, which is, where do I get started? Because there's potentially hundreds and hundreds of systems that you could create, but what are the ones that really move the needle? So I've got an exercise that helps you identify, it's the 80-20. You figure out what's the 20% of the systems that deliver 80% of the result. And it's called the critical client flow. Someone can get an A4 bit of paper, and in the top left-hand corner, you start off and you say, who is the dream client? Like, who is that perfect client that you would love to work with, that's a pleasure to work with, that pays your advertised prices, that buys more things off you, that refers their friends and family? That's your dream client. Underneath that, you write, what is the central or the core product or service that you would sell them first if they were getting to know you? So if you were just getting started in an engagement, what would be the first product you could sell them that would give them a chance to get to know you and would be a great gateway to the rest of your product line. So for example, digital agency for us, our dream client in this example was a franchisor, someone who had franchises underneath them. There's a few reasons we picked that. It happened to relate to also the other businesses that I own, so it fed together. But you get clear on what that is. Then the core product, even though we're a digital agency selling a range of different services, we were doing everything from SEO to AdWords to some content. But the core one that I started off with was a website build. We called it the authority websites that we would build for clients. And the reason I did that is because it's a clear, defined deliverable. We would work on it for a set period. It would give us a chance to get to know the client. If they liked us and we liked them, then after that, it's very easy to then introduce to the other products and services. And then we move into the critical client flow itself. It's just a linear journey that you map down on the page from top to bottom, starting with grabbing the person's attention all the way through to delivery and getting them to come back. So you start off and you go, right, how am I grabbing the attention of this target audience? And it might be referrals. Maybe you're doing your own digital marketing, you're doing some social media, some SEO, maybe you're doing some speaking, podcasts, whatever. You list that across the top of the page. Then you go next step down. The next step down is inquiry. How do you handle the incoming inquiry, whether that's through a phone, an email, a web form submission? Then you move down the page. What is the first step in this process? For a digital agency, it might be some form of qualification. So maybe you have a series of questions they answer or a quiz or something to figure out if they're a good fit. Then we move down the page. After that, we're in the sales process here now. Then once they're qualified, maybe you hop on Zoom and you have a sales call with them. That would be the next box down. And then you jump down to the next one. And then you might, once you've had the sales meeting via Zoom, you might issue a proposal. Then after the proposal, what happens after that? Well, then you might have some sort of follow-up sequence if they don't purchase straight away. Then underneath that, you might need to take some money. They might pay 50% up front or 50% on completion, or like both, or all up front, whatever. You figure out what your money piece looks like. Then underneath that, then you might have some sort of onboarding. So you fill out, the client makes a purchase, you want them to fill out a questionnaire, you set the expectations, you tell them what to expect. Then after that, then there's the core delivery. That's usually one of the most complex, but in the critical client flow, it's just about keeping it very simple, all on one page. That would just be the delivery. And then the step underneath that would be some sort of handover. What happens towards the end of the completion of the project, and lastly, as part of that handover, getting them to come back, buy something else, or refer someone. So if you start off by mapping that out, the critical client flow, if you can make that part of the business happen and not be dependent on any team member, you've created a scalable money machine.
Yep.
Particularly that doesn't work without the business owner. So that first piece is a great way to focus, because there's tons of things you could systemize. You could systemize, how do I hire staff? How do I onboard staff? How do I do my finances? How do I do my management? How do I do any number of things? There's lots of areas to systemize, but just focusing on the critical client flow first is how you make money. And if you can make a scalable way of making money, you're on the right track. So that's step one. And I won't go through all of the steps in that type of detail, but is that kind of clear for you, Joe?
Yeah, that was really clear. That was great. Thank you. Yeah, the critical client flow. I've never thought about it, but yeah, that initial, how do you get the customer? How do you qualify? How do you deliver? As simplified as possible, one sheet. I like that. Very, very, very good. I find way too often people deep dive way too fast too, right? And they go into the microscopic view, and they're never able to provide that top level understanding and view of what's happening. So I love that, and that obviously makes it a whole lot easier to accomplish as well.
Yeah, if someone wants to, you can just do it on an A4 bit of paper. I also have the template that looks like that. It's very simple. That's just the template of the critical client flow. You can get that over at systemology.com/resources. It's just a free little opt-in to download the PDF. Then you move into the next stages that follow. So the first stage addresses the myth that you're going to need hundreds of systems. The next stage, which is assign, addresses the myth that the business owner needs to create the systems. The truth is the business owner is typically the worst person to be creating the systems. So assign is about taking the critical client flow, having a look at your existing team, determining who can do it best, like each one of those steps best, where possible avoiding the business owner. Because a lot of things that people do when they try and systemize is make things just perfect. But if you can figure out who's doing it best and then capture that and then get everybody up to that standard and do it consistent, now that's a huge win, as opposed to trying to engineer something exactly right and perfect straight out of the gate. So it's that second stage is called the assign stage, and it's about figuring out where the knowledge resides. The next step is the extract phase, and this speaks to the idea that systems, it's time consuming to create systems, and people don't enjoy creating systems. The secret for this one, there's two main secrets. The one secret is you need a system for creating systems. So you need a way for creating the systems that everybody can follow. And then the second secret is that it's a two-person job. So you have the person who has the knowledge, and then you have a separate person who does the documentation. So the knowledgeable worker gets recorded doing it, whether it's on Zoom or Loom, or if it's meeting with a client, record it on your iPhone or whatever. Just record it getting done, and then give it to a knowledgeable we call them systems champion, who then documents what the knowledgeable worker has done. Then you move to, yep.
Is the goal with the systems champion to be able to get the same outcome, obviously, right? Or where do you separate who does what? I like that. I've never heard that before.
Yep. So the business owner is very busy. 9 times out of 10, your best team members are very, very busy. So, and oftentimes not everybody enjoys writing systems. In fact, most people don't enjoy the process. They see it as important but not urgent, so they never get to it. So anything we can do to reduce and remove the friction for those knowledgeable workers is a win. So the purpose of the knowledgeable worker is literally just to record them doing it in the moment. The systems champion, depending on what the task is, might sit with them as they're doing it and ask questions if they're not clear. Or if that's not possible, they'll just get the recording. They watch the video, they pull out the key steps and try and add some sub bullets and things like that, and then they send it back to the knowledgeable worker. Because everybody loves to edit, nobody likes to write from a blank page. So if you send them a document that's 3/4 of the way there, that knowledgeable worker will find time to do it. Whereas if you told them to document their systems and processes, they're not going to do it. So it's a nice little hack. Does that kind of help to answer that?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
And then after you extract, so if you think about it, we've defined the critical client flow, we've assigned where the knowledge is, we've started through the extraction process. The step number 4 is organize. This is then about where does the knowledge sit, and also how do you integrate it with your project management platform. So it's about the software stack. The magic, particularly for a digital agency, happens when you're running out of project management software like Asana or Podio, Basecamp, Teamwork PM, whatever the platform is. But you've got a way to assign who does what by when. And when you assign a task, the actual magic happens when the task that you assign also in the description has a link to the system that explains how that task is done. When you get those two together, then you create a level of accountability, because when someone's checking it off as done, they're saying, I've done it to the standard outlined in the system. And if they don't, then it's the job of the manager to go, well, you need to be retrained, or you've got to follow the process. So that step number 4 is all about the organize. Now, step number 5 is what we call the integrate stage. This is about getting your team then to follow the process, because it's one thing to have it documented. It's another thing to have the tools, but then it's yet another thing to actually get buy-in and get them to follow the process. So the fortunate thing is, the person who's listening to this right now, there has never been an easier time in the history of mankind to introduce systems and processes to a team, because there's so much change that's going on in the world with the pandemic and everything. Everybody's working virtually and under different circumstances. There are changes going on in their community and in their lives, so they're accepting of change. So if you as the business owner and your manager introduce this, it's much easier to get buy-in, because you just go, the world is changing, we have to change. This is the new way we're doing things. But you need to think about it in terms of the benefits to the team member, not the business. So why would a team member want to systemize their role? Well, they would want to systemize a role because it makes their job easier. They might want to systemize, you know what it's like. You go away on holidays, you come back to an inbox and it's got 1,000 emails and nothing's moved forward, and you spend the next 3 months trying to catch up for the 1 week that you took off. So if you can let the team member know, by systemizing, we can delegate some of your tasks, and then other team members can move things forwards. You can have a nice restful break, and when you come back, you just pick up where you left off. Other team members, it might be, hey, do you want to move up the ranks in the organization? Well, to do that, we need you to document what you're doing, delegate it to lower cost team members, then I can give you higher value work, and then you become more valuable to the business. So and everybody's different. So you have to think about what the benefits are to the individual, and then also understand that the resistance to change typically only happens right at the start with your existing team members. For once you get over the hump, the hardest bit is the first 3, 6, 9 months. And you need it's like pushing a rock up a hill. Then you get through the other side, and this is when the team says, this is how we do things here. That's when you know you've broken through to the next level, and you've built a systems culture. So that's that integrate phase, and we're into the final couple of 2 stages. The second last stage is the scale stage. That's the 6, and scale is about, now that you've captured the systems around the critical client flow, you figured out, your software stack, you've extracted those systems, you started to get buy-in from the team. Then you need to identify what systems do you need to scale. And this is where you think about the systems like, your finance systems, your HR systems to grow and manage your team, some of your management systems. You bring it out at that stage a little bit later. And then finally, the last one is the optimized stage. And this is, this stage breaks the myth that you have to systemize like McDonald's. There's a misconception that you need to, everybody thinks of McDonald's as the poster child for business systems, but McDonald's has been doing it for 60 years, and here you are just getting started. It's like you're competing in the Olympics against, if you compare yourself to McDonald's, they're a lean, mean, systemized machine who've trained their entire life, and they are just they've won all the gold medals for business systemization. And then here you are coming in and you're trying to compete at the Olympic level, but you haven't been training, you haven't been eating right, you're a flabby couch potato, and then you're trying to compete at that level. So you think, how did McDonald's systemize 60 years ago? Not how are they systemized today. So get yourself a copy of the movie The Founder, and watch the early days of McDonald's and how they just were figuring stuff out. Oh, do we put the thick shake machine next to where you flip the hamburgers, or do we put that over near the window where the drive-through is? Like that's part of their early days figuring out where things went. And that optimization happens last. Just for now, if you can get everybody to deliver to a consistent standard that is the best of how the best team member in your organization is doing it, that's a win. You don't have to make it the very best in the world. And that's they're the 7 stages. It's define, assign, extract, organize, integrate, scale, and then optimize. But that's what systemology is about, and that's what the book talks about. It talks you through those 7 stages.
I love that. That's great, man. Thanks for breaking that down. I think that gives everybody a nice concrete system to use, so they walk away from the podcast with a system, right? And I'm sure most of them will be encouraged to go grab your book as well. So that's great. So how do you go from there, right? If that's the 7-step process, to checking in with your team member, your manager in your Melbourne SEO business once a quarter, right? What are the steps once you go through those 7 to start to pull away without your team feeling like, man, Dave is gone and I'm doing this all by myself, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that in terms of a leadership role in the right way, in your opinion?
Yeah. So definitely finding the yin to your yang is important. So finding the operations person who steps in, who you feel confident about. I like, for me, that person ideally has run a business before, but may have gotten burnt in the past with running a business, or burnt out, and now they're looking for something different. Because if they have an appreciation and an understanding of being a business owner, you're infinitely further along, because it's challenging work being a business owner, and there's lots of things to do. So finding that person is a key pivotal part. Another one, we used quite a bit of the framework from Traction, which is a book by Gino Wickman, and he talks about his EOS system, entrepreneurial operating system, and that has to do with it's not as important for me to follow his exact method for when the meetings are run, but you need to find your meeting rhythm that works. So the group team gets together, on a team call X number of times. You've got a finance meeting that happens with the CEO and the head of the finance department once a month. Melissa and I have our quarterly meeting, and what are we covering in that? So it's finding the when does your sales meeting happen? It's finding the rhythm and the cadence for those meetings, and then making sure that you've got an agenda, so that it's very clear on what you're covering. And okay, well, when I chat with Melissa, we've got a spreadsheet that we use, and it pulls out the key metrics. And a big part of the first part of that session we have together is reviewing the metrics. And we also have, in part of that meeting, basically quarterly rocks. We have these big things that we're working on every 3 months. There might be a project that I'll leave Melissa with. And then when we catch up, we're reporting back on that. So that's definitely part of it. We've always been virtual. So we use Slack for our, intercommunication throughout the day. We use Asana for the management of projects. It's checking in with the team members to make sure that everybody's feeling connected. I did kind of step out. There were a few times, like I remember Melissa, I had a habit as the business owner feeling like anything that I was working on was most important. So if I had a presentation next week, I'd say, I've got to get this slide deck done, and I'd give it to the graphics person. I'd say, jump it to the top of the queue. And I did that 2 or 3 times, to the point where Melissa pulled me aside and said, look, every time that you do that, you're kind of throwing out the work schedule, and we've got client works, and when we're delivering on things, and then the designer says, I missed it because I was working with Dave on this project. And I did it once or twice, and then it got to the point where Melissa, I'd built up such a great relationship with her that she felt comfortable to do this. She went into Asana, she wrote a big message, important, tagged the entire team in it, and said, next time Dave comes to you with an urgent task and doesn't follow the appropriate channels for getting it assigned, I want you to ignore his message. And it was pretty gutsy for her as a manager to say that to the business owner, that I wasn't going things about the right way. Because what I was doing, I was undermining. She developed a system and a way of doing things. And we agreed that it's like when I come into the house, I need to take my shoes off, and I need to be respectful on the rules of the house. When I'm outside of the house, I can be work in whatever way that I want. So I have a an executive assistant, and we work in a bit of a different way because I'm a founder, I'm a visionary, I'm a little bit million ideas left, right, and center, and I want to handball it to someone and have her catch it and organize it. And we work that way outside of the team. But when we were in the the bounds of Asana, and I'm working with the rest of the team, I had a way of approaching things. So having some rules, having some person step in there, and then we also started to gradually move me out from pieces. I stopped doing the sales. Melissa started handling some of the higher level sales stuff, and we had another sales assistant who was helping her as well. And then that reduced the dependency of the client feeling like, oh, they wanted to chat with me because they chatted with someone else first. I used to think, oh, because I'm in all of the videos on the website, they're going to want to talk to me. But when we inserted someone in there, they were okay with that. And then Melissa got it where she would set the expectation. Once it went from salesperson through to operations team, she would then connect them with who their account manager was, and then they would take over that. So it's thinking, moving away from creating everything bespoke as well. The way that we created the products was, while there was some customization there, there's still a set formula, and we moved away from strategies that would change, or not strategies, tactics that would get out of date very quickly, and we moved to things that were more stable. So content marketing, and traditional just good solid SEO, and managing of AdWords accounts, where it was a little bit more stable. So that was some of the other changes. There's a lot to it, and it's probably hard to distill it down into one or two things, but if I had to, it's finding the right yin to your yang. That manages a big one.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. Dude, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. I've really enjoyed this podcast episode, and I want to be respectful of your time and the audience's time. Definitely suggest everybody go grab the book. And then wrapping this up, speaking of books, I'm a voracious reader, David, but I'm okay now with picking up a book, reading the first chapter, and going, and tossing it. And so I either pick it up and I can't put it down, or I pick it up, I read the first chapter, and I'm like, yeah, no thanks. So when I have a chance to interview somebody on the podcast, obviously I admire them. I like what they're up to. That's why we have them on the show. So I always like to ask guests, instead of asking you to recommend 3 books, which I feel like is like what everybody does on a podcast, we like to do something a little bit different. And I like to, looking at your business and your life now, what do you think has made the biggest impact? What book do you think has made the biggest impact on the way that you do business, or the way that your business is resembled and what it looks like today, and why?
The one I'm going to recommend is the E-Myth, and that's probably just because it's so central to systems. It's just understanding and getting to the point as a business owner. Everybody realize just because you can do the thing, because you can run the AdWords account and you do it really, really well, doesn't necessarily mean that you can run an AdWords agency. There's a range of other skills that you need to master. And the more I've done this, the more that I've realized it's actually oftentimes what holds you back is being able to do the thing. So I almost urge the business owner to set up a product line in their agency for something that they don't know how to do, and purposefully not learn how to do it. So for us in the digital agency, a big breakthrough was we started selling video services under a sub-brand, Melbourne Video Production. I don't know how to turn on, I probably know how to turn on the camera, but I don't know how to edit in Premiere and do all that sort of thing. So that meant I had to build that part of the business without me doing the thing. That's the biggest one. And the E-Myth is really great at helping you to understand why the systems are so important.
I love that, because you never end up with the monkey on your back then, right? You never end up being the one, I'll just jump in, I'll just fix it because it'll be faster. You never end up in that situation because you don't know how to do it. So it's a little controversial, I would imagine, to some people to say that. But I completely get your viewpoint. And it definitely makes sense, especially from the systematizing type of roles and what we talked about, and getting other people to buy in and to figure it out, to get them to help build out the systems and processes and get them to really help build the outcomes. In that context, man, it makes total sense.
And the other thing to think about is this is, if it's not your first rodeo, like if this is your first business and you're getting it off the ground, oftentimes, yeah, you will know how to do the thing. But if you've been in business for a while, if you've found yourself in, a few team members around you, you're stuck in operations, you can't seem to grow, and you've got some runs on the board and the clients like what you're doing, that's the right time to think about systemizing and doing exactly what we talked about. But if you're just getting started, then sometimes you have to get on it, because that's how you get the thing off the ground. But you get stuck there. That's where most people have the issues. They start it and then they never stop it. And then I was guilty of that. I got stuck in my agency for 10 years. I think I probably was in the agency maybe 7 years too long in the actual operations. I think that's a good benchmark. It's okay maybe to get your business up and running and off the ground over the course of 3 years. But if you're still in the business, in the day-to-day operations, doing the thing and central to the delivery, and it's been 3 years, you have to start to think about changing what you're doing.
I love it. I feel like I tell my students that all the time. So I really appreciate it coming from you echoing that statement. And Dave, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that people are absolutely going to love this episode. One of the biggest things we talk about is systems and processes and delegating and moving up and out of the business and looking over top and really getting away from being the technician. You got to get there. You got to start there to some degree. You got to learn the ropes. But yeah, after 3 years, if you're looking at your business and you're still running the day-to-day and everything's relying on you, obviously, you got a ways to go. So I just want to thank you, man. This has been fantastic. We'll definitely link up to the book in the show notes. We'll make sure that we link up to that resources page as well that you briefly mentioned. I definitely will be listening to the podcast myself. We'll make that happen, as well as Systemology and SystemHUB. If somebody wants to connect with you, though, personally, it seems like maybe Twitter or Facebook might be the best place. What would that be?
Yeah, I think either of those channels. If they go to systemology.com and then down in the footer, it just links to whatever your preferred method is. If you want to watch YouTube videos, if you want to subscribe to the podcast, Business Processes Simplified, or ask me a question on Twitter, whatever works for you. We're pretty active on all of them.
All right, awesome, man. Thank you so much. This has been great. I know everybody's going to love it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll see you on the next one. Joe Troy signing out.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Me the Nuggets. If you've been enjoying the podcast and find our content helpful, please visit our Apple Podcast page, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a review. Joe and the whole team have been working hard to bring more value to the show. Your feedback will go a long way in helping us make the show better and reach a wider audience.